Boker Tov, today's daf, Shavua Tov, today's daf is daf Lamed Beis and Avodah Zarah. We learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael and Asum Bat Sarah V'Shivya. From the top of the page, the third line, the Cheres Hadraini. So the Mishnah said back on Chavtes and Beis that these things are Asur B'Hanoah. All these items of Zarah, of Akum, are Asur B'Hanoah. Wine that they used in libations, or vinegar that was originally wine, or Cheres Hadraini, a Hadrian earthenware vessel. What's the problem with the Hadrian earthenware vessel? My Hadraini, Amarav Yudah Mashmuel, Cheres Hadrainis, it's the earthenware vessel, it's a kli, earthenware jug of a Hadrian, the Caesar. What was the story about that? What made that so different? As we'll see later on, if you buy jugs from a goy, even at Avodah Zarah, you can kasher them. But what's this business about the Hadrianic vessels? They took virgin soil that had never been planted before. That means that it's very strong. The nutrients in the ground are very, very strong. Nobody had ever worked it before. It was virgin territory, right? Avda, and they planted it. They processed it. Whatever they had to do, they had to plow it and process it. They planted it. And the vines grew there, and they had a very strong wine. And they put the wine that came from those virgin earth and fresh vines. They put that in jugs, chivri, white jugs that are like new umaitzilahu, which are very absorbent. Earthenware is very absorbent especially when it's new. And it would absorb the strong wine in these vessels. And the idea here is that it absorbed it. There was no liquid in there anymore. The wine was absorbed into the walls of the new earthenware vessel. This white earthenware that Rashi says chadashim, that are very new and they are very absorbent. And then what they would do is now you have a jug here, an earthenware jug that had absorbed strong wine. Then they took the jug umatli lahu b'chasbi. They broke it up into shards, into pieces, and each piece basically had wine in it, had wine absorbed into it. V'daru ba'adayu, and they would then take it with them. They would carry it with them. They went out to war wherever they went. Wherever they got there, it was like preserved wine, because it wasn't even in liquid form. The liquid form could evaporate, but here it was in the vessel. Whenever they went, wherever they got, they would soak it in water. They would take this earthenware shard that had wine absorbed into it, put it into a liquid, put it into a pail or whatever, a bottle of water, and it would come wine, because the wine would come out of the earthenware vessel and mix with the water. In other words, it was a very strong, undiluted wine, right? And they would mix it with water, and then it would turn into wine. They would have a drink. That's how they got wine wherever they went. But the point is that it was used by the goyim, and it was wine that was used for avodah zarah, and that's why you can't even have anah from it. And we said yesterday that Friday we said that it was beginning of yesterday's stuff, that wine which was used in a libation of avodah zarah, they poured it for avodah zarah. You can't have anah. It's mamish, according to Rashi, it's like a dead body. It's even matame ba'oel. Stam yenam, ordinary wine, it's asr ba'anah, and it's matame to masmashkim, whatever that meant. Revi's how it's matame, but it's asr ba'anah, but you could drink it. It's asr ba'anah, you could drink it. That's stam yenam. What about bismanazeh? Today you say, oh, it was Jew kosher wine, but a goy could have touched it. You can't drink that wine. You can't drink it. He says here, but unfortunately say, this manazeh, since they actually don't use it for avodah zarah, especially in our locales, it's only usher to drink, but not usher b'hanah. Even though Gemara said at the top of Lamed Aleph, stam yenam usher b'hanah, stam yenam, their ordinary wine is usher b'hanah, but bismanazeh, especially if it's for commercial, in other words, you could deal in it, you could sell it. You can't drink stam yenam. If let's say the wine is kosher, right? It was. What's the rationale for not drinking? For not drinking it, because we're concerned. It's really xera. Like Gemara said, it's xera because of yayin nesach. It really is not it's not, you know that they don't use it. It's a Christian or an Arab who doesn't use it for Avodah Zarah. So, but it's Xera, you can't drink their wine, but you could sell it. You could do business with it. You could have a wine store. St. Louis, there used to be a place called 905. They had liquors. Every year there was a question with Pesach, did it have a Jewish ownership and Chametz Shavuot Pesach, but they had every bottle of booze that you could think of, and wine, all kinds of wine. So, points, can you do business with it? So even though we said Stam Yenim Asa Bano, the Meforshim say Bismana said, since they're not really menasech, they don't actually use it for Avodah Zarah. When they touch the wine or wine that you bought of them that is kosher, obviously, if it's not kosher, it's a different problem. If it's kosher, Stam Yenim is kosher, it's only usher to drink, but not usher bano, and you could do business with it. Some say that only in a place where there's a large loss. Obviously, if that's your business, there would be a large loss if you couldn't do it. So even though we said Stam Yenim usher bano, you could have an Abbas Manaseh, you just can't drink it. Okay, so this is what they did with the Hadrianic wine. And Amar B'Shu ben Levi, about 10 lines down on Lamed Beis Amar Aleph. B'Shu ben Levi, for Rishon Shalom Kishlishi Shohem. That wine was so strong. This wine that Hadrian and his cohorts made, and they absorbed it into the earthenware vessel, was so strong that even after they used it 3 times. Let's say they got to a point of, they traveled and they went to war in 3 different places, 1, 2, and 3. So when they got to 1, they wanted some wine, so they soaked it in water and they got wine out of it. There was so much wine in the earthenware vessel that when they got to plate number 2, they still were able to make wine out of it. And even when they got to number 3, they were able to make wine out of it. And Rav Shimon Levi says it was so strong that our strongest wine that we drink is like their 3rd dilution. It's like their 3rd one. That's how good it was. Hiboilu. So you're not allowed, according to this, it's Asur B'Hana, because they use it for Avodah Zarah. This is really Avodah Zarah wine. So he said, this Hadrianic wine, even though it's not in the wine form, it's just in shards, right? It's pieces of earthenware that has wine in it. Okay, so you can't have enough from it. Can you do this? Can you use it to support the legs of a bed? You have a bed, a little bit crooked, one leg isn't quite as perfect as the other ones. So you can use one of these shards to support the bed. You're not going to drink it. You're not going to turn this into wine. Is it also to do that? Rotza b'kiyuma, when you're trying to preserve it, al yidei davar acher, for some other purpose, not for drinking. Shari aser, is it mutar aser? So of course, machlokes, like everything else. Tashma, Rabbi Yochanan.
The weight might break it.
The weight might break, okay, but assuming right. It's assuming if it's going to break it, then it might fall apart. But let's say you do it in such a way that it's not going to break. It's very thick, and the bed isn't that strong. And can you use it? So it's a machlok. It's tashma Rabbi Yochanan chad aser v'chad shari. One says it's aser, one says it's mutter. In other words, even where you're not having a no, you're not going to sell it and get money out of it. And you're certainly not going to drink it. There's an opinion that it's aser. Another opinion says that it's mutter. Meisvei. Hadar durin. Durin are like barrels, small barrels that are presumably the barrels are earthenware, right? Earthenware vessels. But rukvos are leather bottles. Most of the bottles that they had those days, they didn't have them. They had glass, but most of them, the bottles that they used were either earthenware, jugs, whatever, or made out of leather, like a leather canteen. These belong to goyim. In other words, they originally of the Avodah Zarah, the barrels and the jugs, the leather bottles, and yet Jewish wine that was poured into them. Yain shel Yisrael konas men. Also, you can't drink it. Why? Because it could absorb some of the taste of the wine that's in the barrels or in the leather bottles. You're allowed to have an so here you see that you could have an according to these things. Hey, Shimon Guda, now we're going to come to his name, important. Hey, Shimon Guda testified in front of the son of Gamliel, Al Rabbi Gamliel. He testified to the son of Rabbi Gamliel about this son's father, Gamliel. Sheshasam imenu ba'aku. He actually drank from it. Not only we say you're allowed to have an but you can't drink from it. He said you could drank from an aku, but they didn't agree with Rabbi Gamliel. Okay. Nodos shalaf t'kachavim. What about, again, leather bottles? Notice we had several times already here, are leather bottles. Leather bottles. He said, Osir lasos mehan shtichan chamor. You cannot take these leather bottles of a goy and use them, turn them into like a cover, a shatiach, like a carpet for an animal. Let's say you want to cover the animal with it or use it, below a saddle or something like that. You can't make those things out of it. So what do you see? Even you're not talking about drinking it. In other words, the dardurin, we said in the Kvol Shavik Chavim, and there's Jewish wine in there. So everybody says you can't drink it, but it's allowed to have an all. Rav Shimon Gura says he even drank from it. Okay, we're not sure what happened over there. But he said Jewish Goyish leather bottles. Shmuel says you can't even use it as a support to put it on the back of a donkey, right? You can't even use it for non-drinking purposes. So how could you say, have a half minute to say, we said that if you're using it for, let's say, for a support for a bed, it's a machlokas. One says also, one says mutter. How can you say it's mutter? He says over here, Shmuel says, name B'Shum ben Kufsoy. You can't use it if it's a leather bottle that had goyish wine in it. You can't even use it to turn this leather bottle into a leather cover for the back of an animal, even though it's not for drink. This is a case where you're preserving it for some other purpose, not for drinking it. So it's a kasha on the one who says we don't know which one's which. We have Rabbi Elazar and Bech, one says asur, one says mutter. The one who says mutter, here you see this is asur. So he asked them back, shouldn't be able to sell jars, earthenware jugs above the goyim. You shouldn't be able to sell them at all. But why do you say over here that you can't have anoah from the leather bottles of a goy? You can't turn it even into a cover. You can't use it for something else. So if that's the case, you can't have anoah from anything at all, even if it's not drinking purposes. How are you allowed to sell goyish jugs, which you're allowed to sell? You shouldn't be able to sell. What's the between leather bottles or earthenware bottles? That's different over there in the case. The reason why you can't use the leather bottles of goyim and turn them into a cover for your animal, in other for some purpose other than drinking, we're afraid that your own leather bottle will break open, because leather can tear, right, or can burst open. You might tear open, be it lena, and then you'll take that one from the back of the donkey that you used it to make a cover, be it and you'll use it to patch up to sew into your own bottle. In other words, we don't want you playing with the leather bottles of goyim, because you might actually use it for your own bottle. You might patch it up with it, and you'll drink from there, and you'll get the taste of there in your Vietnam. The Rash says the goy's wine will give a taste into your wine. You'll be drinking effectively goyish wine. That's the reason why. In other words, it's different in the case of leather bottles. We say you can't make it as a cover for the chamor. That's different. Not because you can't have a no from it, like using it for a support for a bed. Maybe for a bed, he says you're allowed to. The reason why you can't use it as a cover for a donkey is because we're afraid if it's exposed, it's sitting there on the donkey, and your own canteen breaks, your own leather canteen breaks or tears open, you'll use it. You'll take a piece of that and patch it onto yours. But if you say that, okay, so we said that's if your kasha was on the one who says it's mutter. How are you? If it's mutter, you see here by the leather bags, you can't use it as a cover. That's different because you might come to then patch it onto your own leather bottle and drink effectively goyish wine. But the one who says rotz became all day or aser, so why are you allowed to sell and deal and make money from goyish jugs? Over there, the isser is not the substance is not there in front of you. You don't really feel it. In other words, in the difference of the Hadrianic jugs, what's the problem? We say you're allowed to sell goyish jugs, but not Hadrianic jugs, because Hadrianic jugs, the wine is there. All you got to do is throw it in a little bit of water, right? Toss the into water, and you're going to get wine. So that's different. But otherwise, if it's just a regular jug that was used by a guy, the wine doesn't stay in there, and it's not, you don't have the substance of wine there. So we said that listen to this case. We have Shimon ben Guda. Notice that the Guda that we had before, Shimon ben Guda, is with an aleph at the end. The Guda spelled with an aleph. And he testified in front of the son of Gamaliel that Gamaliel drank from it, Naku, then they weren't moted to him. So the question now the Gemara asks is, for a minute, said they weren't moted to him. In other words, he drank from there and they weren't moted. But a minute, if you have wine that came in these these are larger leather bottles of goyim. Also, you can't drink it. Mutar b'ano. Fine, that's what we saw so far too. Right? You can't drink from it, but it's mutar b'ano. Okay, and Hayed Shimon ben Guda. Notice the Gudas with an ayin at the end, right? With an ayin at the end, in front of the son Ring Malil, Al Rabbi Gamliel, honoring himself, Sheshasam Imenu, that he drank from it. Ba'aku v'hodelo. In this version of the story, right? Shimon ben Guda said in front of Ring Malil, in front of the son Ring Malil, the Ring Malil drank from it, and they agreed with him. So did they agree with him or not? So my lohodelo. So what does it mean? My lohodelo. What does it mean? The first case when we said they were modatim, the Kamer Hasam called Siato. All his company, those the other people were not moda. Avopano modale, but his own son admitted, if his father drank from it, his son went along with the father, the son of Ramulio. Or Iboisem, where you could say that there were two different stories. One is Guda Lachud and the Guda Lachud. The one with the Aleph, the first story was Guda told him that story, and they weren't moda to Rabbi Gamliel, who drank that way. And the second story with Guda with an ayin, when he told the story, they were moda to him. In other words, there was two different stories when they reported it. The first one they agreed with, the first one they did not agree with. The second one they agreed with. Lezeh lo hoda, lezeh hoda. In other words, he wasn't moda the first time, but the second time somebody came along and told him that your father did so and so. So the first time he wasn't moda. When he heard from the second one, he was moda. Who was this son?
But they made it. They make the plural into singular. Right?
Yeah. He Lahodolo was him, right? Lahodolo. Now, who was the son of Rabbi Gamliel? We said, what was the story? We said this Shimon ben Guda said to the son of Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Gamliel drank from it, and either he wasn't moda, like you say, he wasn't moda, or in the first version, everybody else wasn't moda, but the son was moda. In the second version, the son wasn't moda the first time, but he was moda the second time. But you're saying the son wasn't moda to him. But if his son, who was the son of Gamliel? If the son was Shimon Gamliel, right? We said before Shimon Gamliel or Shimon ben Kufsoy, also man shliach on the chamor. You can't make a shliach for the chamor, but it's mashma that you can't use it at all. You can't use it at all. And now he's saying that the son of Gamliel was moda. If that son of Gamliel is Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, he's moda that you could even drink from it. That's what we're saying. That you could even drink from it. He says. Right, we said that he was the first time he said father wouldn't drink from these. The father, we said that it's also to drink and it's mutar b'ano. And he told Rabbi Gamliel's son that your father even drank from it. But Rabbi Gamliel himself said you can't even use it for shtichin in the case of the leather bottles. Gamliel said himself that it's usher, that you can't even use it for anything else. So how could he say that over here? He was moda that you could have enough from the jugs. You could sell the goyish jugs. So Tosas near the bottom Tosas is like this: because the son of Gamliel is Shimon Gamliel. The Gamliel osir lana shtichem. You can't even turn it into covers, and as you can't use it in the covers. And here he's saying that he's being mako and saying that he agrees with his father. Right? We said this in the second version or the first version that everybody else didn't agree with him, but the son was moda. He's saying here you could drink actually from these leather bottles. In other words, both cases we're talking about you can't make leather bottles or nodos or rikvos, probably just different sizes. What's in rikvos and nodos are leather bottles. So how does this Shmuel jive? First he says that you can't use the leather bottles even for a shatiach, for a cover for an animal. And then it's mashma that he agrees with his father that he even drank from the leather bottle. How does it make sense? So he says, l'chara, that's a problem. But he could say that this one, Shmuel said, the name of Shimon Kusboy, that it's osher to make them. That was the name of Shimon Kusoy, says Tosas, v'leilo svirule. Reading Tosas 4 lines from the bottom of the page. He himself doesn't hold that way. He holds that it was mutter. Inami, or you could say, Gamliel Dehacha, is not this Gamliel we're talking about his father and the son. The son is not Shimon Gamliel. Inami Gamliel Dehacha, who's Keno Shel Rebbe. He's the grandfather of Rebbe, right? Rebbe's father was Shimon Gamliel. But who was Rabbi Gamliel's son? He had a son. He said a son Shimon Gamliel. You had another son, Upano Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. That would have been Rebbe Chanina ben Gamliel, meaning that would be Rebbe's uncle. Rebbe's uncle. Achir Shimon Gamliel Aviv Shel Rabbeinu Hakadosh. V'chein Mashma said. This gives another example of that. And then he says, two lines from the bottom page, V'hoda aminam, Sopek Sotash, Shmuel Yakor Atzmo, Ein Yola Nafshi, Elif Yodam Hoyu Levei Saviv, Lanashtar Meno, and any kind of ben Achi, Abba, my cousin in Asia, Mashma, Shlohoylo Shum Ach, Smashma that Shmuel didn't have another brother called Ruchanin ben Gamliel, right? Shum Ach, Zeb Shmuel Azokein, that was the elder of Shmuel, of Shmuel the Yavna, she was Kanos Rebbe. Understand? Rebbe's father was Shmuel, his father's Shmuel the Yavna, and Shmuel the Yavna had a grandfather, Rabbi Gamliel Hazakein, and he also had a father of Shimon Gamliel. So we have at least two of Shimon Gamliels. Rebbe's father was Shimon Gamliel, and his great grandfather was Shimon Gamliel. And there's at least six Rabbi Gamliels. You have Rabbi Gamliel Hazakein, Rabbi Gamliel the Yavna, right, who was the grandfather of Rebbe, right? Then you have Rabbi Gamliel, the son of Rebbe. They have Rabbi Gamliel Haravi, Rabbi Gamliel Chamish, Rabbi Gamliel. There's a lot of Rabbi Gamliels. They kept using the same name as they did. That's where we get the tradition to name, after the grandfather, or use it as a second name. The first name has to be some name like Shaked or, some other name like that, like they have today, right? The kids always have to come up with some new name.
Nimrod.
Huh? Pardon?
Nimrod.
Yeah, Nimrod. Yeah.
Nimrod Gamliel.
Yeah. At least that's biblical. It's not a made up name. All right. Back in the Gemara, 2 lines from down page. What are these heart skins? What does that mean from the heart? Tanaban Ezo or Lavav. What's an or Lavav? We said also in the Mishnah Shaftes and Beis that's Asr Bahano, because it was used as a sacrifice for Avodah Zarah. They used to do is the Goyim used to cut out the animal while it was alive. Cut out the animal's heart. They would make a circle by the heart and pull out the heart. Use that as a sacrifice. So he says, what is Ezo or Lavav? Kol Shekarua Kenegalev. If it's torn where the heart of the animal, opposite the heart of the animal, the kodur, and it's cut out, kaminaruba, like a window, meaning it's circular. Circular. And yeshel of karadam, if there is some blood there, like some coagulated blood on the skin, that's a sign that it was cut when the animal was still alive. So the blood would pour out and stain the skin, stain the hide. Then it's also, you can't have enough from it. That's literally using of ozar. Anal of karadam. But if there's no blood on the skin at all, right? Then it's mutter, because that's a sign that it was only cut open after it was skinned, meaning it wasn't used in the avodah zarah of offering the heart, but rather it was just, the animal died and the animal was killed or whatever died. And then later on, much later on, the skin was used and cut out. So if there's no drop of blood on there, then it's a sign that it wasn't used as a that's only if it wasn't salted. But if you salted it, we know, like with meat, right? How do you kasher the liver? By salting it, because the salt absorbs the blood. So if this hide was salted, then then it still can't use it, because you can say that the reason why there's no sign of blood on the skin is because the salt had absorbed it. Shmuel said in the Mishnah that once, if it's a circular cut, it's that, because that's how they always made a circle in the cut. But if it's oblong, like a rectangle or whatever, not circular, then it's mutter, because it wasn't used for Avodah Zarah. So Amar Rabbi Shmuel lachem Shmuel. Lach is like Shmuel. Amalei Abai lach mechlal tepli. There's no machlokas about that. The Mishnah just said that oris levuvin are asur b'hana. Shmuel says only if it's circular. Who argued with Shmuel? Did somebody else say that if it was oblong, it's asur? Why do you tell me the halacha? If there's no argument in the Mishnah, you have to tell me the halacha. If everybody agrees, you don't have to say the halacha is like this one. Halacha is mashma. Halacha mishval depligi. Is there a machlokas? Amalei man nafka min halacha. What's the difference? I said the halacha is like him. Amalei Gemara. We learned the Gemara. What, should just be a song? Whereas you don't just say something for nothing. We have this in many places. It's not just singing along. If you say the halacha is like it's mashma, there's a machlokas, and we didn't see any machlokas in the Mishnah. So he objected to that. In other words, Rabbi Yosef said that. Abaye was a Talmud of Rabbi Yosef, right? He was a Talmud of Rabbi Yosef, was a Talmud of Yehuda, was a Talmud of Shmuel. So he said, why are you telling me the halacha is like him? The halacha is not, don't just sing along. Tell me if you say the halacha is like him, it's mashma, there's a machlokas about it. Let's say meat that went into the temple, right, to the church, we'll call that. That's also because they use that in temple worship, right? I'm sorry. If it's on the way into the church, it's mutter. But if it's on the way out, then it's also because you could assume that it was used in the Avodah Zarah worship. So we say that if it's on the way in, it's okay. Mantan, who's the author of this? I'm going to feel about Abraham Yochanan. The local is not like Rabbi Elazar. Why? Or Rabbi Elazar. In other words, the animal, you're taking it already in meat form. That means it was already slaughtered. So if your meat form is going into the church, he says you could have an offering because it wasn't used yet in Avodah Zarah, only if it comes out on the way out of the church. But this is not like Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says, even if it wasn't in the church yet, but when the guy slaughtered it, and then he takes the meat in, probably at the time that he slaughtered it, he already had in mind for Avodah Zarah. So this part of the Mishnah does not go like Rabbi Elazar, because Rabbi Elazar holds that as soon as he slaughtered it, even though he wasn't yet in the church, it was Avodah Zarah meat, and you can't have an off from it. But if it came out, it's like the slaughtering of mason, of dead, like meaning like idols, which are dead and have halacha like dead, like a dead person, because it's Asherban on my time. It's impossible. It's impossible if it was taken into the Avodah Zarah, to the church, and then brought out. It's impossible that it wasn't used for Avodah Zarah. Money of Rabbi goes like Rabbi Seir. The time of Seir Omer, we had this before. How do we know that that the sacrifice of an Avodah Zarah is matame ba'oel, like a mess? It's matame mace. Shneimar vayitzmedu leval por. They join themselves to the Baal movement, the Baal Peor. Right? They attach themselves. They join the church. Vayochlu zifnei mason, and they ate the slaughterings of mason. The slaughterings of mason, meaning the carbon of the mate that they sacrifice to their god, is called mason. Just like mace, ma mace matambo, just like a mason matambo. After matambo, we had before that the Avodah Zarah is matami bo'ol, right? We had that before. The whole story they learned out from Miriam, which is learned out from Egla Rufa, right? But the wine also, the wine was used in the sacrifice. We said there, asher chelus v'chemi yochelu yishtu yain nezechem. Just like a zebach is also, the carbon is also bano. We have the same idea over here. And Rashi says, even though the Gemara is talking about matame ba'oel, but we're really getting to the point. Take a look in Rashi. Mames matame ba'oel, about 10 lines from the bottom page in Rashi. When we know from there, mames aser b'hano. It's like Masar Mano. We had it before in Agmar too. But Thomas Sham Miriam, Sham Egla Rufa. After also aser b'hano. So that's our point over here, because we're explaining the Mishnah. The Mishnah is saying that these things are aser b'hano. So fine. So Zivche Mesim is really bringing down a slightly different drasha, right? That anything used, EF like it was chavim. Goes to Rabbi Sarah says that takuvas of zekhavim, which is really the same as the yayin nesach, which is also takuvas of zekhavim. But here we're talking about meat. So he says he's talking about meat. So meat is Rabbi Sarah's beferish halacha, that an offering of zekhavim, meaning an offering of an animal, is matameh, just like we had by the meat. Like some love zivchei mesim and ma meis matameh after takuvas also matameh. Before on Chav Testament Beis, when we talked about the wine, right there, he also used the same pasuk. Both of them the same thing. But there we're talking about wine. Here we're talking about meat. The same idea. If the people going to the tarfus of the pilgrimage, are going up to the church or the temple for a pilgrimage, also lost is what you want. Like this really is like we had at the beginning of the Masechta. You can't do business with them on their way up there, because either they're going to thank their god, their idol, for the business that they conducted with you, or even worse, that you're going to sell them something they're going to use on a bazaar. Let's say you sell them an animal that they're going to take and sacrifice. That's even worse. Not that they'll thank their god, but they'll actually use what you sell them. Don't do business with them. Right? I'm sure about also the Oslo Mordechai is going to thank his god. On the way back, right, you're allowed to. So Amar Shmuel, on the way there, you can't do business with him because he's going to thank his god. Those will motor coming up, he's going to thank his god, the idol, for the business. But Chazor, on the way back, mutter, you're allowed to do business on the way back because he's not going to do Avodah Zarah now. Might have whatever was done, but he's gone on his way home. Yisrael, let's say a Jew is going to the church. The Jews are more committed, right? Yisrael on the way there, you allow down the kapschus. Maybe he'll change his mind. He's on his way to a church revival. Up to taking the pilgrimage there. Maybe he'll have a charot and he'll come back and he won't do it. Till Mahar Bay, he won't go. But Chazora, but on the way back, we said on the Goya on the way back, he's finished with church now. Now he's going to play. He's going to the picnic. But the Jew on his way back, if he actually went to the church on his way back, you can't do business with him. Why? Even the Avik Ba Mahadar. Once he attached himself, once he tied himself to Avodah Zarah, right? Mahadar Harabas, he'll go back again. You know, he got enthusiastic by the church revival. We said a Jew is on his way to the church. Even on the way there, it's usher. You don't assume he might do tshuva and not go in. That's speaking about a Jew who's already a known apostate. The body also, he's certainly going to go. So sometimes being do business with a Jew could be worse than doing with a goy. Let's say the guy is going to a market. He's not going to the church. There's a big church market. There's a goyish market. He's just going to the market, but he's not going to church. You can do business with him on his way there or not, because even if you sell him something, he's not going to the church to thank his God. But if a Jew is going to that goyish market, on the way there, you're allowed to business with him. But on the way back, you can't do this. Now, why? Why do you say you can't do business with him? Because you're saying, listen, when the Jew went to the goyish market, maybe he sold them an idol, right? What did he do there? What did the Jews know? The Jews know that these goyim, they're stupid, right? They worship idols. So the Jews says, okay, I'll sell you an idol. I got a whole stock here of idols, you know. Had them made in Japan or in China, and you sell your idol, because maybe the Amri he sold a real idol. The mayor was so therefore he has the money. The money that a guy spent on the idol is with the Jew. That's why he can't do business with a Jew on his way back from the goyish market, because he might have sold an idol to the guy, and now he has the money for that idol, and don't do business. You don't want to have enough from that money. So why don't you say too? You said if a guy goes to the market, well, you could always do business with him, whether he's on his way there or on his way back. Why don't you say also he might have sold an idol there, and now you're going to get money. You're going to have enough from that money. The man of speaking about that, he's got the money for that. If a guy goes to the goyish market, he's not going to the church. You don't assume he sold idols. He could have sold a shirt. He could have sold wine. He could have sold anything. Not necessarily avodah zarah. Yisrael nami neimer glima zav and chamazam. Why don't you say also that if a Jew went to the goyish market, maybe he also sold him a shirt or sold him wine? Why do you assume that he sold him an idol? The answer is E said the havile. If the Jew would have had those things like wine or shirts or anything else, merchandise to sell, Hacham he would have sold it here. He wouldn't have gone to the goyish market. The fact that he went to the goyish, why did he go to the goyish market? Because he knows there he'll have customers for his idols. All right, it's a little bit strange, right? It depends what's the market and who we're dealing with, etc. What do you assume? The Jew could have sold his merchandise here. Why did he go to the goyish market? Because he wants to sell them idols. But the same goyish market, the guy could have sold them anything. That's what we assume. So he said, now what is that speaking about? That's speaking about back on the pilgrimage, right? We said, you can't do business with them if they're going to the church, if they're on their way to the pilgrimage. Why? Because they'll thank their God. We're talking about on the way to the church, not on the way to a goyish market, but they're on their way to church. Don't do business with that God. But the ones who come out of the church, you're allowed to do business with them. Why? Because they're not going to thank their God now. They're on their way home from church. That's only if they didn't come in a whole band of revivalists together. But if they left the church and they're coming home from the revival and they're coming up as a group, then asurin ema daito lasso. Then you can't do business with them, because you're assuming if they're very enthusiastic and there were the whole group of church revivalists, then you assume that they're going to go back there also and thank their God. So don't do business with them. Better to avoid doing business with of the avodah zarah. Notice so he said like this. Notice again, those are leather bottles, whatever size they are. Kankanim are earthenware vessels, and we said earthenware vessels are much more absorbent, right? They both absorb, but the earthenware vessels are most absorbent. That's how the Hadrian shards or Hadrian jugs were made, from taking that fresh, strong wine and putting them in a white earthenware vessel that was new and would be easily absorbed. Notice grudim if they've been stripped. In other words, there's no lining on them. Chadashim, brand new, mutarin, you're allowed to have anah from them, and you're allowed to buy them, right? Why? Because there's no isser involved. If they're brand new, right? That if they're brand new and they're stripped, so there's nothing going to hold it in there. They haven't been lined with pitch, with tar. You're allowed to. Yeshanim umzavafen, if they're either old, been used before, or they have been lined with pitch, with tar, that makes them more absorbent. Asur, you can't do business with them at all, and you can't use those at all. So in the Mishnah, right, this is really, and you can't use those things because you can't get the wine out of them. There's no way to clean them up, but we'll see there is a way. The Mishnah said, notice how Rav Meir said they're also b'ana. The Chum say it's not also b'ana. Just also to use them in drinking. So what are these leather bottles that we're talking about? So if they have not been lined yet and they're brand new, so the jars have not absorbed any wine, and you're allowed to right? So if they've been they're stripped and there's no tar in them and they're brand new, so when the wine comes in just for a short period of time, it has not absorbed anything yet. Lo bala or benodos. So he says here the nodos of, I'm not talking about the kanam. The Mishnah said nodos of chavim, or Rav Meir says also about no. The Chum says only also to drink. But if you're talking about the leather bottles, which are not as absorbent and they're brand new, they're brand new. They maybe just use them maybe once or twice. You're allowed to wash them out and use them. But if if they're old, that means they've absorbed a lot, or they've been, even if they're new, but they've been lined with pitch. They line them with pitch in order to make them strong and make them absorb the wine very well, right? And also, so when even if they're brand new, but you line them with pitch, they put in wine. The first wine just neutralizes the bitterness of the tar, but it's also because it's absorbed it. But if the guy has pitched it and lined it with pitch, he put the pitch in, he poured the pitch in and lined it with him, and the Jew is standing there, and there's no problem. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? If the guy took this new leather bottle and he lined it with pitch, right, and he poured in wine, so what if a Jew standing there? When the guy poured it in, he could have poured it in to be menasachet for avodah zarah. If the guy lined it with pitch, he poured the pitch in and lined it, and the Jew poured in wine. Not the guy poured in wine. The Jew poured in wine. And there's another Jew standing there. Then there's no problem. There's no problem. Why? Because the guy just lined it with pitch. After he lined it with pitch, he didn't put any wine in. The Jew put in wine, then there's no problem. So the Gemara says, if the Jew is putting the wine in, what do you need the other Jew standing there for? Says because he's busy pouring the wine. Maybe the guy might mix the wine, might put his finger in or put a stir in or something, or pour a little bit more wine in, and you don't realize it. So that's why you need another Jew standing there to make sure that the guy didn't do anything with the wine. Rav Shapiro, get a comment, Mikar, like you said originally, the guy poured the wine in. Here's the problem. Here's why it's okay. The truth is that the guy just lined it with pitch, and the guy then poured the wine in. So what's the problem? That should be, why could that be mutter? You said there's no concern. The answer is because when he poured the wine in there, it's like pouring water into mortar, into cement. When you have cement and you mix the water with it, you come back an hour later, you don't see any water. It's all hardened, and you can't. Same thing over here. The first wine that the guy put into the leather bag, the leather bottle that he had pitched with, put some pitch in, he put some tar in there. The first wine gets absorbed in the pitch, and it just neutralizes the pitch, but you'll never get the taste out of that. The first wine, if it's used a long time, it's used much more afterwards, then you'll have a problem. But the first wine that was thrown in there is like putting water in mortar. You're not going to see it afterwards. You see from Rav Svid, if a guy, let's say he poured, you have a Jew has a big pan, or let's say a big jug, whatever, a big receptacle of salt, and the guy poured in wine in there. Shari, it's mutter because the salt absorbs the wine. Maskar Ravashi, midami, how can you compare it? Hasam cause a libut. In the case of the wine that the goy poured into freshly tarred, pitched leather bottle, that's it. You're not. It's gone. Hasam cause a libut. Hachala cause libut. Over here, all you have is you have salt which has a lot of wine in it. You have like a wine flavored salt. But in the case of the pitch and in the jug, in the leather jug, when you pour the wine in, it gets absorbed in the jug and it's never going to come out. Baradi Taya. Baradi was a Arab. Anas Hanu Zike Rav Yitzchak Yosef. He stole some jugs from Rav Yitzchak Yosef. Ramabu Cham. He put some wine in there. Vadrino, then he returned them. He was a nice guy. After he stole them and used them for wine, he returned them to Rav Yitzchak Yosef. Also, Shalom Medrash, Rav Yitzchak Yosef came and asking the base Medrash, can I use them? Omer Lei, Rav Yirmiyah, this is what he said, Kacho Rav Ami, Halacha Lemaisa, that's Halacha, Memalin Mayin, Shloshi Yomim Ma'arin. That's how you can get rid of wine. Again, we've said till now, you can't use wine of a Jew, of a goy, because it was a Avodah Zarah, and it's Asr Ba'ana, and if it's really was used for Nisuch, it's even Matame, like a mess. Right? We said, if it's Stam Yenam, okay, it's Asr Ba'ana, it's Asr to drink, it's Asr Ba'ana, Stam Yenam, or Stam Yenam is Asr Ba'ana, but we said, okay, Bismana said they're not using it, Mela. But what happens if you know the guy, he used it for, he had put his wine in there, so then it's Asr Ba'ana. But what do I do in this case? The guy borrowed my jug against my will, and he put some wine in there. What do I do? So they told him this is what you could do. Fill it with water. This is how you can kasher it. Yeah, you can't use it away, but you can kasher it. Fill it with water for 3 days and pour it out. After every 24 hours, you have to pour it out and put in new water. In other words, for 3 days, you put water in there. After each 24 hours, you put in new water. Done. That's our barrels, meaning Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef's his leather jug, who was stolen by the guy, and the guy used it. That's how you can kasher it, right? Abel did too, but if it's their own that they used all the time, but Kiyas Rabban Shimon, he said Shimon Lakish Echet Shalom Vechet Shalem, whether it's ours or theirs, that's how you can kasher it. You can kasher it by this way. Notice that's only if it's what? If it's leather bottles, right? Leather bottles, you can kasher them away. Aval kankana, as we said before, kankana means earthenware bottles or jugs that are more absorbent. Maybe you can't kasher them. Omer Ravashi, lotion kankana makes no difference. It makes no difference at all whether it's leather or not. That's how you can kasher them. All right. We'll pick it up from the Tana Rabbanan tomorrow. It's 3 lines from the bottom of the page. Mark that. Have a good day. Shavua Tov B'Kula. Thank you. Thank you. Where did you daven yesterday? Hashivenu or Shvad?
Oh, okay.
They had a minion?
Yeah.